Before we get into it, I just want to give you a really high-level overview of what I'm going to be talking about, hopefully to make sure it all makes sense in the end. I want you to have a great experience. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is why being a stranger can actually be a good thing. I don't mean it in a negative way at all, in the title or in the talk. I actually think this is a positive. The second thing I'm going to discuss is why I believe that we, and when I say we, I mean design and designers, need to move from interaction to strategy, and I'll explain exactly what that means. I realize there may be many non-designers here as well, but I think this should still be relevant for you. How we can have meaningful conversations, and what actually does that mean? What does having a meaningful conversation mean as a designer working in strategy? And then finally, the test. So everybody this evening is a test subject, is testing out this kind of very loose framework for creating a value proposition. This is something that in McKinsey, especially designers, we're trying to do all the time, because to have those meaningful conversations, you have to explain exactly what you can do and how you can do it. And that's what we're going to do tonight. And even if you're not a designer, I still think this should work for you. So, hello, strangers. Again, that's not a pejorative at all. Stranger comes from the Latin extraneous, which just means something that is outside of an experience, a place, a time, or knowledge. And that's really the sense that I mean it in this talk. And right now, I see some familiar faces, which is awesome and a little bit intimidating, but there's a lot of people I don't know. And I'm hoping that by the end of this talk tonight, that what is outside is going to come inside, meaning you're going to connect hopefully with what I'm sharing. You'll move a little bit closer to what I'm sharing and what I'm saying. And I'll also be expanding my own understanding of you as we kind of interact together. So that's my goal, is that we're starting strangers, but we're ending up as friends. So I want to discuss the first part of the title, Stranger in a Strange Land. So I said that it's not a negative. Maybe it's sometimes uncomfortable, but I think it's actually a very useful perspective to have. And so I've kind of broken down this feeling of being a stranger into three metaphors. There's the explorer, the exchange student, and the time traveler. And what I want to share is not just what that means to me, but also the things that I've learned kind of being a stranger in these spaces, and how I think that they've been really useful and continue to be useful for me working now in McKinsey. So let me go to the first one. So stranger as explorer. I've been living abroad now. I was just having a chat with Aki. We're both actually from California and from Los Angeles, actually. And we've both been living outside of the States for a long time. For me, it's been over 20 years, I think 25 years now that I've lived abroad. I started when I was a very young man, 18 years old. And I know what it's like to be a stranger. I was a bit of a vagabond, literally showing up in new countries, new places, and not knowing anything at all. So really being a stranger in the truest sense. And you know, in that experience, or during that experience, really just learning how to not just survive, but thrive, learning how to learn the language, learning how to just how to be across many different countries, has given me a lot of skills which I think are very useful for me as a designer. So the first one is just being really curious, right? You can't be in new places, in new lands over and over again if you're not a curious person, ideally. And certainly being curious has really helped me a lot, and it continues to help me as a designer. I think being curious and wanting to ask questions, wanting to understand is probably one of the key skills I have as a designer. And the second thing is, you know, as an explorer, you have to learn how to problem solve. You have to understand and figure out how to do basic things. Like right now in Thailand, I'm trying to figure out how to get a motorcycle license, right? So if you want to survive and thrive, you've got to figure out how to get things done, how to learn a language, how to find a job, how to find an apartment, and all the rest of it. And also just really becoming comfortable with the unknown, because as we know, communication isn't just about language and the speaking part. There's a lot of other parts to communication which are much, much harder to understand and learn, all the non-spoken stuff. So we've got to become comfortable with what we don't know. The second one is exchange. A stranger is an exchange student. Now, to be honest, I've never been an exchange student. I desperately wanted to when I was in high school. I begged my parents, you know, can we please have somebody as a exchange student come to us, or can you send me abroad? Unfortunately, it never happened. But I feel like my current experience at McKinsey is a bit like being an exchange student. What I mean by that is, you know, in addition to being in a new place with maybe a new language, you're in a very specific place. You're in a home where there's rules, there's a specific culture, there's rituals, there's all sorts of things that you have to learn. And while it is an exchange, I'm there to, if I take the McKinsey as an example, I'm there to bring design to McKinsey. But I've got to do it in a way that's really connected to the structure of McKinsey as it already is. And the things that you learn as an exchange student or as a designer in McKinsey are things like adaptability. I think this is really key. Also, you know, the importance of culture and customs and rituals. This is maybe similar to any large organization, but as design is fairly new in McKinsey, it's even more important. And then again, communication. So, you know, how to communicate in ways that are effective, are respectful, are building on what everybody knows so that you can really become part of the family is a really key part of this experience. So, and the last kind of metaphor for stranger is the stranger is a time traveler. And I've got to give it to Dan. I think that the name of this series, The Future of Now, just articulates perfectly this idea that design, being a designer, working in design, is really about connecting to the future. I see this more and more as people as speculative design becomes more visible. And I think it's just perfectly described in the name of this series, right? Because as designers, whether you're an interaction designer, an architect, a strategic designer, we have to think about the future. We're projecting ourselves into the unknown, into a future. And not only are we trying to understand that space, we're also, as designers, trying to work backwards to understand how we actually create that future. And I think this is an extremely powerful way of thinking, and it's something that I'm very, very interested in, because I think the benefits of this, the net benefits as a designer, are utilizing our imagination to see the future, understanding the relationships between things in the future in time and space and with now. And another thing which I think is often undervalued or misunderstood about design is that how we bring structure to that process, structure to build those things that we want to create in the future. I think designers inherently understand this. I think a lot of people who are outside of design don't understand it as well. And so getting to a point where we can explain the power of these things that we bring as people, as designers, is really very, very important. So this is just a little recap. As a stranger in place, in different countries, as a stranger in this wonderful world of McKinsey, generally as a stranger in time and space as a designer, I feel like I've learned a lot of skills that are very, very valuable and are the types of things that are going to help me move into that strategic space. And why is that so important? Because strategy is where the decisions are being made. And I think given the way things are in the world, from my perspective, we need to be doing a much better job of designing the world and the things in the world that are serving everybody. Designing for inclusivity, designing for connectedness, designing for sustainability. These are things that I believe are really important. And those decisions about what's getting designed and how they're getting designed is happening at the strategic level. So not only is it me in my role at McKinsey as an experienced designer working with strategy teams, working with organizations to decide what to do and how to do it. It's how to get there in the first place. And I'm going to expand on this model a little bit. This illustration, this is borrowed from Dan Hill, who I don't know if you know him, but he's a really fascinating guy. He's written some books. I think Dark Matter and Trojan Horses is the first book he's written. He's pretty prolific on Medium as well. And he created this diagram to explain the difference between interaction and strategy. And so interaction is basically all the one-to-one touch points between people and things, right? So this is where a lot of designers, we spend a lot of time creating apps, designing tangible things that people connect with. The experience space, or we can call it the service design space, this is where, you know, we're expanding the view, we're opening up the view or the cone. So we're taking in more people, more touch points, more of the ecosystem. But really at the other end is strategy, and strategy is where decisions are being made that affect all the experiences and all the interactions. So to be able to design the right interactions, we need to be making the right decisions. I know there's a bunch of designers here, maybe some non-designers as well, but I've spent a lot of time in this space, at the interaction space, kind of making things. I love doing it. I still get to do it now, but very rarely. But I know there's a lot of value in creating and crafting those one-to-one experiences that we create for people. And, you know, kind of leveraging just my experience over time as a designer, as a person, as a stranger living in lots of places, and building that curiosity mindset that really set me up to move into the experience design space, and really being curious about things and trying to dig into the truth, right? Find out, uncover what's there. But this is a lot more about people than the interactions, right? So we're expanding our toolkit when we move into this space. And then finally, there's the strategy layer, where the things that are being designed are being driven. And this is kind of where I'm entering now. I wouldn't say I'm fully there yet. It's still a work in progress. Still learning the language of McKinsey and the language of business. But I think it's incredibly important because of the reasons I've given, right? I want to be somebody who's helping create more things, better things for more people in the world. But the people who are deciding those things are working in that strategy space. So I need to be in that space too. And I need to be having meaningful conversations when I'm in that space. And I think that the biggest challenge for me as a designer, and possibly lots of other designers as well, is that meaningful conversations means not talking about design, right? At this level, at the strategic level, meaningful conversations is again, to use the metaphor of the exchange student, kind of translating what we do into a language that people sitting in that space will understand. And I think that the language of design is not that effective in that space. So if we can move into this space and we can have meaningful conversations in a language that is understood, we can build trust. And if we can build trust, then we can be making some of those decisions to create the right things. So I'm going to take it back now a little bit to sort of the McKinsey of now and where I'm at now within McKinsey. So McKinsey is almost 100 years old now. I think it was about 97 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And for probably about 95 or 96 of those years, a good portion of it, McKinsey had one problem-solving approach, let's say. And it was the McKinsey approach, and it's what they called hypothesis-led approach. It's where you structure, hypothesize, and efficiently solve the problem, right? This is what consultants do. They know what needs to be done. They know on the first day, they go in and they solve the problem. And McKinsey is incredibly good at it because they've been doing this for so long. In the last few years, McKinsey has brought in several new problem-solving approaches. So now officially we've got 5 problem-solving approaches, not 1. And design thinking is one of them, right? This is an amazing opportunity. This is an amazing recognition of the power and potential for design to make impact. But they've only been doing it for a few years. And if anybody here remembers, let's say London or Europe in the mid-2000s, possibly Australia as well, or other parts of the world. In the mid-2000s, I was in London and I was working for digital agencies. And that was about the time that a lot of the big companies were really interested in digital, wanted to bring digital into their work. But their main point of contact for creating a lot of stuff was through ad agencies. And ad agencies, they didn't really understand digital. They did, traditional creative. So in about 2007 and 8, there was just a whole raft of big advertising agencies that were doing acquisitions, bringing digital people in, buying digital companies, and trying to bring them into their organizations to serve the needs of the clients. And it was pretty messy. It was a really interesting time. It was a bit chaotic. But at the end of the day, that is just business as usual, right? Digital is everywhere, and it feels like it's always been that way. But there was a period of time where it wasn't so clear and it wasn't so easy. And I think that management consultancies we're kind of getting out of the messy stage, and we're really moving into a stage where there's a lot more integration and a lot more connection between these two approaches, the hypothesis-led and the design thinking-led approach. But we as designers in McKinsey, we can't just go in and say, right, design thinking, it's a thing, and this is how we're going to do it, and everybody else follow along, right? It's like I said, it's got a dynamic, a culture. There's rituals. There's all sorts of things that any organization that's been around for a long time has, and McKinsey has it. And it's an amazing experience for designers to be now part of this journey. What I'm getting at here is that, even though we're here and we're ready to do what we do, we need to do it in a way that's going to be understood. And what I mean is we want to have those meaningful conversations. We want people to understand the value of design and utilize it and bring impact. But we've got to learn how to talk about it. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So for a long time, this is how I would describe myself as a designer, right? I'd say, somebody says, oh, Gordon, tell me about yourself. And I'd say, Right, I'm a designer, and I've been doing it for over 20 years, worked in branding and digital and blah, blah, blah. I'm really hands-on. I love getting my hands dirty. Pretty technical as well. I worked in digital for a while. Now, the problem with this is that whenever I try this, most people, as soon as I said the word designer, they just stopped. They're not really listening to me anymore. And I think this is particularly true in organizations which are very new to design. And the problem is the word design itself. I'm sure many of you here have had that experience where somebody asks what you do and you say you're a designer. There's a look of confusion, or they immediately ask, I don't know, are you a fashion designer, or are you an interior designer? Whatever they know about design is what is going to frame their understanding of design. And it's even harder with some of the newer design disciplines. So if you were to tell somebody you're a service designer, or God forbid, if you tell somebody you're an experience designer, which I did once on a plane in Cambodia, and I had a very aggressive, angry person who just couldn't believe that that was a thing, and demanded to know what it all meant. And it was a little bit awkward, to say the least. So design, for anybody, I think it's a bit of a challenging word to use in a way that's going to be understood the way we would like it to be understood, meaning people understand what it is I do, the value it brings, and why it's important. But I don't think we can do that using the word design. So I'm going to encourage everybody tonight to not do that, okay? Stop calling yourself a designer unless you're in a very friendly group like this, full of designers, and it's a safe place and everybody gets what we mean. So I wanna move on, and I don't know if there's a message about time, but if I'm doing okay for time, Dan, can you?
We've got 25 minutes. We must probably go over to 30 minutes. So I'm letting you go. Yeah, I'm letting you roll.
Okay.
Keep going, Gordon. I'm hanging in here, buddy.
Okay. So we're getting to the meat of the exercise, and if I'm moving a little bit faster than I intended, I think that's fine, because I'd really, for me, what's interesting about tonight is just learning what you're learning, right? To understand whether it's whether I'm teaching it or sharing it, in a way that's actually making some difference or impact. So, so your value proposition, right? This is not the point of the talk, but I think it's an important part of that need or desire, at least from my part, to move into that strategy space, to have those conversations. So this is something that at McKinsey, a lot of experts, we do spend a lot of time on trying to create and craft a value proposition that people will understand. But this is my own take, okay? This is not I wouldn't even call this a framework. This is just a kind of my view about what goes into making a value proposition. We're going to be creating one tonight in breakout groups. And I'm really excited to see what comes out of it. So the first thing about your value prop is that it should be contextual. It should be contextual to the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Which immediately, if we jump to the bottom, actually, which means we're probably going to need more than one. Right? It's very normal. You shouldn't just have one value proposition. You're going to have lots. The second thing is I think it should be aspirational, meaning we're not just talking about who we are now or what we can do now. I think we need to talk about what we want to be in the future and what we want to achieve in the future. Even if we feel like it's a bit of a stretch, because I believe that most designers I know, this is something quite challenging for them to do, to really market themselves, toot their own horns, kind of, explain how much impact we're going to bring to the world. Like it's not a comfortable thing for us, but it should be aspirational. And then finally, it should be true, right? It should be something that describes something you can do, an experience you have, a skill you can bring to bear that can actually achieve the problem that you're trying to deal with in the context. And because it should be true, I think it also comes to kind of the real point, which is that means it's going to be quite uncomfortable, right? I think a good value proposition should actually feel really challenging to say. And I'll show you exactly what I mean in a minute. But that's kind of the overview of the framework for creating a value prop. So to put my money where my mouth is, so I no longer describe myself as a designer with 20 years experience. I might say I'm a product expert with strong technical background creating digital tools to improve safety and efficiency in high-risk environments. This is a very specific value prop I would use when I'm talking to certain people in very specific industries. I'm focusing on the things that design is meant to enable or achieve, for example, safety and efficiency. And I'm also stating very clearly that I'm a product expert, right, with a strong technical background. Now, I don't really like using the word expert. I never refer to myself as an expert if I can help it. So that definitely makes me uncomfortable, but it's there. It's in my value prop. Here's another one. I help organizations create impact by making customer centricity a core part of their business strategy. Now, it may sound like I'm using buzzwords, right? Customer centricity. We know if we're doing anything in organizations, we know that there's a million people in organizations. Oh, customer centricity, it's really important. But that is my truth. That is my truth. That's exactly what I do. I do deep customer research. I spend a lot of time thinking about the problems of people. I spend a lot of time trying to articulate ways of understanding those problems so that they can be solved efficiently and really effectively. So, but the word I'm using is something that's going to resonate with people. And here, customer centricity, oh, that's something we think we need, but I can back it up. And that's my truth. So we're going to move into making a value proposition. And I'm going to be using Dan as a guinea pig in a moment. But before I do, I've created a value proposition specifically for this talk, which is like yeah, no worries. You're my man, Dan the man. Before I share my value props, so here's the framework, right? Framework light. This is a work in progress. We're testing it out tonight. Thank you very much. The first one, what's the context? So what's the problem we're trying to solve, and who are we solving it for? The second thing is the aspiration. Who do you want to be in the future, and what do you want to change? If you don't feel you're an expert, but you want to be an expert, that should be your aspiration. Because the only way you're going to reach that is if you're doing the things that are going to give you that experience. The third thing is the truth. And I think this is maybe the most uncomfortable one, right? What unique skills, experience, or understanding do you have? Now, I've got a few friends who've shown up for this talk. Some of them are people who are just amazing designers who are teaching me stuff all the time. But I'm still going to put out there in my value prop a truth, even though I'm a little nervous. So my value prop for this evening, right, for this particular experience we're having, I help people create personal and power valuable value propositions through structured facilitation and collaboration. Okay, so let me break it down. The context. So I want to make all of you tonight comfortable with me leading you in a value proposition exercise in the first place, right? So that's my context. I want you to feel comfortable, and I want you to feel like it's effective. The second thing is my aspiration. I want you to be inspired. Maybe it's not about this part of the talk. Maybe it's about being a stranger and living in Cambodia or whatever it is. But I want you to be inspired by learning a new way of communicating. And I think a value prop is a good way to do that. And then the truth, I'm a good facilitator. I do it a lot, spend a lot of time in workshops, people one-to-one. I'm not so sure that's going to be the case in Zoom because I've never quite had to do it like this. But generally speaking, I can say I'm a good facilitator. It's what I do professionally. So that's my truth, right? And that's how I created this. It's short, it's sweet, feels a little bit weird to say. I'm probably going to change it, but I think I can back it up, right? You can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to try. So, Dan, we're gonna like live stream model this for you before everybody breaks out.
Oh, I've got to be honest with you. So I'm a little bit nervous.
Good.
So, everyone, as we're going along, if you have any questions, anything that you think of as Gordon's speaking, as I'm talking, especially about creating your own value props, just put them in the chat and we'll revisit them at the end. All right, Gordon.
Okay, so Dan, so in the mural, I've basically got the breakdown that I just shared with everybody.
Yep.
So we can refer to that if we need to. If you need a cheat sheet, it's there.
Okay.
But let's just start with what's a problem? Excuse me, a problem you're currently trying to solve, or a space that you're interested in getting involved with. What are you doing now?
So the problem we're trying to solve at the moment is how do we become truly digital? How do we scale? How do we scale as a business without being there? Because we can only run so many workshops a week or a day. So how do we scale without there being more of us?
Okay, so I'm going to put in as a small business. So how do we become truly digital scale? Okay, what's some of your hypothesis about what's required to do that? Is it getting more clients? Is it
it's
making more money with clients? Like, what does it mean?
It means okay, so it's how do we? It's not about. So it's never about. It's not about money. You don't run a business if you want to make money. It's got to be something you love and get up in the morning and enjoy doing. It's actually about how do we make sense, and how do we make a smart move, and how do we make the right move in order to do that? And that, in our hypothesis, is how do we test out the content that we do in person without sacrificing the quality of the content,
without being there in person.
Use AI, to run sessions. How can we scale our tools, our frameworks, without the loss, without there being a gap in quality?
This is a very interesting problem statement. I think we need a different canvas, man. I think this is maybe not a value prop one, but
it's been the last 3 months of our lives here at More Space.
Yeah, without losing quality.
I should time this, by the way, because otherwise.
Yeah.
I've got 4 minutes left.
Okay, cool. That's fun. So this isn't just about necessarily a personal value prop, right? You can also do this for business. So what's the aspiration? What's your kind of vision of what you need to be, or what you want to be?
We need to we need to turn everything we do, we need to change our business model's based around value creation, and value creation can be quite a broad topic because it means many different things to many different people, depending on where they sit in the business, whether they think about it from a business function perspective or their own perspective. So we're all about value creation. So we're not about bums on seats, if that makes sense. So how can we make that every part of what we do? How the value creation? How can we ensure that is consistent in regards to the services and products that we put out into the world?
So is a shorthand for that to say that you need a value that's disproportionate to the size, right? Or kind of is a multiplier of the actual size, so not dependent on a one-to-one. Okay. 10x. Can we just use that? That's a
10x. I'd say 100x. Why not 100? Let's scale it.
100x.
That's what I say with the how might we's. I see Archie laughing.
And so what's your truth? What's the thing that you and Aki, that More Space for Light brings to the experience, the connection with your work?
What do we bring? Well, we are an external. We bring, well, using the name quite literally, we create that space, we create that framework, we create that permission. We lead without bias. We are an outsider with a guide. Our persona is a guide. Our brand persona is a guide. And Stephen, what is holding me back? It's holding time. You only have an amount of time in a day. That's one of our constraints. And focus. So we create the space for organizations to have the conversations in regards to alignment, strategy definition, prioritization, or validation. And we able, and our, I guess our superpower is being able to take that from the conceptual or the conversation through to the tangible, if that's a prototype or a prototype, if that's your niche.
Sorry, I'm just on a roll. Sorry,
got 2 minutes left. This is, by the way, guys, this is super uncomfortable. I'm in front of most probably about 30 strangers here. Well, 25 strangers and 5 sympathizers. So, so I'm hoping it encourages you in a moment to give it a go. Also, we might go over by 10 minutes, so please stick around to the end.
Dan, I was just going to say that you could use our sort of philosophy where we provide a guiding light to inspire and the space for teams to explore.
Awesome.
So I'm obviously there's a lot here, and I'm also feeling nervous because there's a lot going on, and apparently I can't spell tonight.
That's right. Designers don't need to spell.
Okay, but what I'm hearing here is actually really important, because you know what I would immediately, what's coming to mind for me is that, okay, you have a need as an organization, as a business, right, doing a very specific piece of work. And if I kind of frame it the way we've been talking about value proposition, is that you need to be able to communicate that. For that growth to happen, you need to be able to say, we are an organization that is worthy of that growth that is, you know, out there, has value to bring to the world, that is going to help us grow so that we can also take it back out into the world again, right? So what I'm seeing is I don't know if More Space for Light has a value proposition, but you know, the things that you're talking about, space, space for light, insight, guiding light, you know, different perspective, etc. For me, that's an environment, right? You're creating a world, you are, right? And I'm saying it as a truth, not as a, we want to be, we aspire to be. No, you need to make it real. It needs to be uncomfortable. So I guess what I would advise is that, you know, where you started out in trying to create a value prop by describing your aspiration as a business, and your aspiration was really focused, right? We want to grow the business. We want to be able to scale. We want to ensure the quality is there. I actually see there's an opportunity here to refine that into a value proposition that you can then put out and test that as a means of enabling that, right? Because you know, there's a lot of details that still need to be uncovered. How do you digitize? How do you scale? But those things are out there, right? These are not really unknown tools. I think what's really much more important is that the enabler of that is not whether you have the right capacity or the right tools. It's like, do you have the right aspiration, and are you communicating it to the organizations, to the entities that are going to say, this is what we want. We see this value and we want it. So,
hey Gordon,
yeah,
should we turn this around and give everyone a chance?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Look, we can take this offline. I reckon we'll take this offline. It's awesome, though.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So I've set up breakout rooms. There's about 3 or 4 of you in a breakout room. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Gordon, I'm going to steal you away.
Yep.
You might end up in a room, but I'll bang you out. And what we'd like you to do, so I'm going to put the questions from the value prop. I'm going to broadcast them into your rooms. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to have a conversation around your context, your aspiration, your truth. Please be vulnerable, because it is hard. So you've all heard me talk and I've stumbled my way through it. I didn't want to take up that much time. Give it a go. We'll bring you back and then we'll go on the board and we'll add yours onto the board, okay? So I'm going to send you in there, and then once I've sent you in there, I'm going to broadcast the questions. So I'm going to throw the floor open to some questions. I have some, if nobody else has any. Would anyone like to ask Gordon any questions?
I have a question that actually came up in our breakout group, how do we? So my question is, with all of this goodwill and traction as to having a more inclusive, a more socially aware area of strategy and business consulting, which is all well and good. I think our question was, how do we evaluate that success? How do we evaluate that impact? Are there any thoughts on, how is it measurable? How is innovation measurable? And are there any potential case studies that you could share from McKinsey?
Yeah, that's the key question, right? Like, it's what are we measuring, and how do we value it? We get that question a lot. I think the default answer is always to look for some kind of monetary value, right? How much money are we saving, or how much money are we making? But I do see small shifts particularly with design and designers, and I see a couple of designers, a colleague of mine, Justin, my mate, who does really great work as well. We are often pushing for different measures of impact, right? So things like safety, or things like time saved, efficiencies, but not just. I mean, it depends a lot on where and when and how. And the thing is that, the safety one, for example, that could be, let's say, an oil and gas company, and some of them take that very seriously, and you don't need to convince them to, value that as potential positive impact. But there's still a lot of organizations which don't necessarily. Don't really look at alternative ways of measuring impact, or what actually impact even means. So I think it's a conversation that we're having in this moment constantly, but I don't think we've solved it yet. But we're trying.
So something we've found at More Space in regards to seeing tangible results is when we leave and they're still practicing some of our frameworks and the things that we've introduced into the company, and we're seeing people that are on the tools that are generally solution driven, and they're actually taking a step back and they're using the tools to abstract problems and coming up with new solutions that might not necessarily relate to something that goes out into the world, but we're giving them the permission to say that failure is not a bad thing, and building that kind of have a go and do something and create something and show something mentality to people, where we're removing that fear factor. And that might not, Graham, necessarily be like a tangible monetary, like short-term impact, but from a long-tail perspective, that whole concept, that whole conversation around change of mindset, what we're finding in many organizations, there's a big appetite to change the mindset from old ways of working, old ways of thinking. And I think COVID especially has been a great demonstration of that, how people have had to shift dramatically, but seeing that organically happen as well within organizations has been a big win for us going in as a consultancy.
Excellent, thank you.
From your what differences have you perceived and what between? I think there's a question there from Tanya. We'll close out with that one question, and then I've got a question we're going to end with. So from your experience, Gordon, what differences have you perceived on mindsets between different geographies and countries?
I'll keep it contextual to work. I've been living in Southeast Asia for a while, and you know, work quite heavily here. I think it's, yeah, in terms of design, exactly. So I definitely think that there's a different understanding in terms of sort of design acceptance and maturity of what design is, what it can do, etc. I think the way that plays out is that you know, the speed and acceleration of innovation and transformation is extremely fast in places like Thailand and Singapore and China, and a lot of that is I think built on, you know, which is kind of the startup approach. We find something, we improve it, we fix it, we drive it further, but I think that what's lacking and makes it a little bit hard for me is the fact that it hasn't necessarily gone along with all of the hard work that design has done in other places. Also in terms of, let's say, government support. So for example, in the UK, there's a lot of support, a lot of education about design, which we don't necessarily have here in Thailand yet. I used to work at a university, Graham was a colleague as well, teaching design to students. So we're trying to help bring that capability here, but I think we're a long way off, to be honest. Sorry, that was a little bit of a rambling answer, but it is different. How about that? It's different, and it's
yeah,
it's
it
a
makes
challenge.
sense. Thank you.
Gordon, I'm going to ask you quickly, what are you reading right now? Can you recommend anything? Everyone loves books.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. What am I reading? Let's Talk About Race. If anybody's heard that book. An American author, particularly pertinent now given what's going on in the States. I'm reading a lot of Medium articles. Actually, yeah, so I had a whole slide of people I was going to suggest that you follow. So Christine Wodka, she's a user experience expert, WODKTE. I can share the links in the chat. Dan Hill, amazing writer, just really kind of big thinker about space, about cities, about the world. Really love his stuff. Guy called Dan Levy, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's doing some amazing stuff. And there was one other person I wanted to share, Kat Holmes. Oh, that was great. I got to meet her last year. Kat Holmes writes books on inclusive design. And I got to meet her last year in Singapore. Really amazing woman. I think she used to be at Google, head of inclusive design or something. So this is where my head is. It's really just about people who are trying to expand the boundaries of what design can do, what it means, that we're not just talking about screens and like what stuff looks like, moving well beyond that. We're talking about how to design the world in better ways for more people. And Kat Holmes is on there, Christine Wodka, and Dan Hill.
Cool. All right, Gordon, I've shared some links in the chat. So I've been furiously doing some Google searching for you. So guys, go in there, add them to your list. The Dan Hill one I shared earlier on, and we'll add them into the article. Thank you so much, Gordon. So thank you, first of all, for those of you that stayed behind for 15 minutes. My apologies. It's been brilliant. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much for your honesty and participating. Gordon, thank you for your generosity and your time and being part of it.